Hey everybody! I had to climb down from the treehouse because of this blooming rose daphne. I wish I could make the smell come through the video, but if you've seen my last video, we've talked about identifying trees, and we've even listened to the sounds of amphibians, and I've got to apologize. I made a mistake. In my last video, I misidentified one of the frogs. The northern leopard frog is not the sound that I was hearing. It was actually the wood frog. So if you go back and watch that second video, make sure to watch our corrected version and share that one. It's more correct than the one where I made my mistake. But in this video, we're going to be talking about other creatures, including nesting birds and even a mammal you might be chasing down with me. So watch and make a list and see if you can add to all the species you've learned about. If you take all the things we've learned in the first and second videos and add them to this, you're going to have a pretty significant list of species that you will have learned about, and I hope you continue to watch and continue to add to your knowledge outside. You don't have to live in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont to enjoy the species featured in these videos, because many of them grow all over the northeastern United States and in eastern Canada. So get outside and look for everything that's blooming. Hey, come here, you crazy dog. Oh. My pecan. Well, not everything this season that's hatching is pleasant, although we'll be talking about birds and amphibians that we'd like to see. Unfortunately, now in Vermont we have some creatures, arachnids, that we never really want to see. Ticks. Yes, when I first moved here 20 years ago, there were no ticks in Vermont, and now they're a part of life when you go outdoors in the spring, summer, and fall. And right now, even though it's still pretty cold at night, the ticks are out, especially adults. There's 3 in this jar that I pulled off of Bing Bing right here just this spring. Hey, Bing Bing. So I'm gonna turn it over to a good friend of mine from Northern Vermont University, Dr. Alan Giese, one of our nation's experts on ticks, because there are 2 species of ticks that you need to look out for. And the deer tick, or the black-legged tick, is the one that is considered more dangerous because it carries Lyme disease. However, the best place to get tick smart is at the Vermont State Department of Health website, which you can find the link to here in the comment section underneath this video. And you should go there and find out what you need to know about getting ticks off of your body and what to do if you've been bitten. But I'm going to let Dr. Giese show you how to identify the most dangerous of them all, the black-legged tick.
The black-legged tick, also known as the deer tick, is the only one that carries Lyme disease in our part of the world. The females are bigger than the males, but the way you really tell them apart is the female has this exposed red abdomen, not covered by the dark black or dark brown scutum. And in the male, the dark brown scutum covers the entire abdomen, so there's no reddish part sticking out. That's how you tell a male from a female. And then here's a nymph right here. Nymphs are important to think about because most cases of human Lyme disease come from bites from a nymph. And the reason for that is that they're so easy to miss once they're on your body.
When I was making the last video, I accidentally stumbled upon a woodcock nest. I literally almost stumbled upon it because the mother did not move until I was about a foot away. And her nest and the eggs were so well camouflaged, she was so well camouflaged, that even after I knew where she was, I could not see her. But I will report that she did return to her nest, and she's taking good care of her babies. And at night, by my house, I can hear the male calling out with their distinctive beep sound. And in addition to making that funny sound, woodcocks do an incredible dance that causes them to spiral around in the sky, making all kinds of funny Looney Tunes kind of noises. So I hope you look into more about this woodcock. And I didn't want to get any closer to the nest again because I didn't want to scare the mother away any more than I needed to. But woodcocks are nesting now, and most especially you can hear the males doing their little song and dance routine any night for the next couple of weeks. with those funny looking long beaks. You're probably wondering what the woodcocks eat, but those beaks work like tweezers or like chopsticks, and they allow them to reach deep into the mud in the wetland environments where they love to live, and they get the grubs and the larvae and the worms that are hiding in that mud, which is why one of the nicknames for the woodcock is the bog sucker. And its other name, perhaps my favorite, is the timber doodle. Here's an environment that only happens during the springtime. This is a vernal pool. And vernal pool, like vernal equinox, means a springtime event, but vernal pools are very important habitats for many amphibians like salamanders and frogs. Here they can mate in the perfectly moist environment that they like, and they can lay their eggs knowing that those babies, when they hatch, the tadpoles, won't have to worry about any fish eating them, because this pool will dry up sometimes before summer even gets going. And that means that fish could never survive in this water, but the water usually lasts long enough during the spring for the amphibians to get their mating rituals done, and then they can lay their eggs. And in this vernal pool, I've already seen what I think are spotted salamander eggs, and what I'm pretty sure are wood frog eggs. Now, I know I made a mistake in my last video when I misidentified the wood frogs and I thought they were leopard frogs, but here I think I've definitely found wood frog eggs. Wood frogs mate for only a few days, and then their eggs are gestating for only a couple of weeks. But those eggs are green on the inside. If you're wondering why those eggs are green, some frogs, like wood frogs and salamanders too, have symbiotic algae that live inside of their egg casings. And if you remember symbiosis or symbiotic creatures like the lichens we talked about before, in this case, the algae inside of the egg provides oxygen, just like plants and trees provide the oxygen that we breathe. And then the little amphibian inside the egg makes the carbon dioxide that feeds the algae, and they rely on each other while they're inside of that little tiny environment. So think of that little algae as sort of a air supply for the little amphibian that is developing inside of that egg. Look at these tiny log cabin caddisfly larvae. They've snipped up the leaves to make themselves costumes to blend in with their environment. As adults, they can fly as insects, but now they're hiding in this vernal pool. While I was out here checking out the vernal pool, I noticed this, what biologists would call scat, but everybody else calls poop. And it was right on this log, and I happen to know that this probably came from a red fox. They like to communicate with their scat. They poop in high places, prominent places where anybody can see it or at least smell it. And if I was a fox, I would probably be able to smell and tell you how old this was, but it looks like it's at least a few days old. Well, I thought we invented poop emojis. Just a safety tip, kids. Don't touch animal scat with your bare hands. There often are very many parasites. Oh, look, I think I see one. And if those parasites get under your fingernails and then you eat something or put your fingers in your mouth, you might be getting a parasite from a wild creature, and I don't want that to happen to any of you folks, so please, don't touch the poop. While I was inspecting the fox's BMDM, I heard all these owls hooting in the back, and those happen to be barred owls. Barred owls are very common here in Vermont, and they often sound like they're saying, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" But in this case, it sounded like they were having a party, many owls somehow communicating with each other. Well, here is a nest from what is probably one of my favorite birds, the eastern phoebe. This is a bird that travels from as far away as Mexico and Guatemala to come to Vermont to have its babies here. And they always make a new nest every year. And this nest looks like it's made out of adobe. It's mud and straw and hay mixed together so well that it is rock hard. This is an old nest from years ago, and the phoebes keep coming back and building a new one. In fact, if you look above me, you can see this year's brand new phoebe nest. I've lived here for 20 years, and every summer, without fail, I've seen phoebes return. Perhaps it's the same family. They always build a new nest, and only once have I ever seen these nests fall. Those phoebes are incredible birds that when they're hunting, they eat bugs, and if you watch them flying, like I've gotten to see them fly around my barn at night, they seem to hover in the air. They can almost do tricks like a hummingbird where they can freeze in the air and hover, and that probably helps them catch a lot of insects. But the most famous bird lover perhaps of them all, John James Audubon, when he was a kid growing up in France, noticed phoebes in a barn where he lived, and he conducted what is considered the first ever experiment of bird banding. John James Audubon, a man whose face is carved into the side of the Fairbanks Museum, he tied a little string around the phoebe's leg and saw it migrate away for the winter, and when it came back in the next spring, it was the same phoebe with the same piece of string. And it's probably reasonable for me to assume that the phoebes that I see flying in this barn for the last 20 years are all related. They're probably descendants of the first ones that moved in here more than a century before I was even born. So phoebes are one bird that will come to you and come and build a house in a barn or a shed, maybe even on the porch of your house. So this is a bird that's good to look for. Sorry about the horses. They want more attention. But if you want to know what a phoebe sounds like, its name is actually its most obvious call. They often, the males say, Phoebe, Phoebe, Phoebe. So if you hear that bird call, maybe there's a nest nearby. Well, here's our Bachelor Willow. And if before, last time we checked in on this fella, his little flowers just looked like little gray fuzzy tails, well, now you can see their true purpose. All these stamens that are now standing up, dumping out tons of pollen that blows in the wind. And although we worried about this bachelor last time, I'm happy to report that I've discovered some female willows nearby. Let's go look at them. Well, should I let our Bachelor Willow know that I've found his mate? This is a female pussy willow, and the flowers on this plant look very similar to the males, except the males are now producing pollen, and they're yellow from all that pollen and those tall stamens. The female flowers are actually greener in color. You might notice that there are a lot of them, and they're smaller, and they're closer together. And instead of having stamens that make pollen, these little flowers will have pistils, and when the pollen borne by the wind or maybe an insect lands on this flower, this plant will make the seeds with the pollen from the male behind my house. So too bad they can't hang out and have a date, but you know, with tree relationships, everything is always a long distance relationship. You might remember from my last video, I introduced you to the white ash species and the other ashes that grow in Vermont. Well, unfortunately, our trees, the ashes, have a new threat. It's called the emerald ash borer. And until the museum is open to the public again, and you can come and see this great display that teaches you all about the emerald ash borer, I want to teach you some of the things about this insect, because you might help us spot it early, and you might help to stop the infestation of this insect, which threatens about 5% of all the trees that grow in Vermont. Right here you have the larva, a little tiny grub-like creature that tunnels under the bark, and the adult emerald ash borer beetles. They're very colorful and green, and I want to make sure you don't mix them up for other insects, which are totally fine hanging out here in Vermont. Now, there are lots of insects that do belong in our forest, and you have no need to worry about most of these. The emerald ash borer, on the top left of this chart, is the only one we're concerned with. All of these other insects belong in our forest and are not putting an unnecessary strain on our trees. When emerald ash borers are larvae, the little grubs tunnel under the bark of the ash tree, and they make all of these tunnels. However, there are lots of other bugs that do this too, and they don't threaten our forest the way the emerald ash borer does. The emerald ash borer is an exotic, invasive pest, and there are no predators that have learned how to eat it yet, so it could go uncontrolled in our forest unless something like the woodpeckers learn how to find these little grubs. Here you see more of those tunnels made by emerald ash borers. The larvae make those tunnels, and the adults make that D-shaped hole. But the problem with emerald ash borers is that they have no predators in this region yet, so their populations can grow out of control, and that would doom our ash trees. Here is another D-shaped hole made by an adult marked with a red highlight. That is the hole to be looking for on our ash trees. Emerald ash borers are a threat to all of the species of ash that can be found in Vermont, including the white ash I showed you in the last video, and black ash and green ash too. This chart from last year shows that the emerald ash borer is already in many parts of Vermont, including the southern reaches of Caledonia County, where I live. So we all have to play our part to look out for signs of this insect infestation. In addition to knowing how to look out for the emerald ash borer, there is something simple that you can do to make sure it doesn't spread anywhere further than it already has. Please do not transport firewood outside of the county where you live. So if you want to take some ash logs to your camping trip, don't bring them. Buy the firewood locally wherever you go. That way you won't accidentally be transporting emerald ash borer larvae in the bark of the ash wood that you might have in the back of your car. Don't transport firewood, and you can help prevent the spread of the emerald ash borer. Check it out. That's a porcupine. Let me see if I can get closer. You can see the porcupine is showing me his business end. He doesn't want me to come up on him from the front. He's walking away, but he's not too afraid of me. The porcupine is an herbivore and a rodent. That means it's very closely related to squirrels and chipmunks and guinea pigs and capybaras and mice and rats. But this porcupine eats tree bark. Think of it as sort of like its other cousin, the beaver. But instead of cutting down trees, the porcupine climbs up into the trees and peels the bark in that way. And because their food is available all year round, porcupines have no reason to hibernate. You can see them active at all times of the year, but they love green grass too, in addition to their tree bark diet. I'm sorry I scared the little fellow, but you can see that that's his defense mechanism, climbing into a tree. He's gonna wait until I'm long gone before he climbs down. But he doesn't have much to worry about with all those quills on his body. Would you want to try to attack this fella? In fact, look, he's already climbing down. I failed to intimidate him fully.